Hey, what's up guys? I want to talk to you about the second video I made. I guess it's the third video, episode 2. I'm taking it down. It's not the kind of video I want to make. Not only that, I'm changing the name of the channel to Drew's Mystic Review. It's a little bit more approachable. It's a little bit more, it advertises more so what I want to do. Being that not many people know what Orientalism is, or maybe they get a certain idea from it, I figured something a little bit more pragmatic would be more useful to me. So with that, I'm gonna call this episode 2, and it's the kind of episode I want to make, and I'm happy to bring to you. So here we go. So this episode is about the Upanishads, or specifically one Upanishad. And the Upanishad I want to talk about today is the Katha Upanishad, and that is the Upanishad of death. In the West we get this idea of death being negative, scary, sad, all types of things. And it is. I'm not going to say it's not. But this Upanishad really brings into a new perspective of it, and really talks about immortality, avoiding the suffering of death, enlightenment, things like that. So let's get into it. Basically, it is a dialogue between a young man, Nachiketa, who is a devout practitioner of all the scripture. He's well read. He's very religious and devoted to the practices. It is a conversation between him and King Yama, who I believe is the king of death. Nachiketa has questions about how to be virtuous, what is behind death, how do you avoid death, things like that. And Yama is basically going through and saying, like, I can give you, because you're so intelligent and wise and all that, I'm going to give you 3 wishes. The first 2 wishes were basically like for his family, and the third one, if I recall correctly, basically saying like what's behind death? What's the idea there? Do we live past death? And Yama, he says, ask me a different question, any other question. In fact, I'll do anything for you as long as you don't ask that question, for goodness sake. And it's so cool, doesn't it feel like that sometimes, where it's like maybe you think about it and you're like, oh my God, I can't wrap my head around the idea of my consciousness ever ceasing to be. And if it goes past death, that would be wonderful, but I just couldn't possibly know. So King Yama, I feel like this conversation kind of personifies that question of like, is there consciousness? Do we live past death? Not only does it echo that question, but it echoes how difficult it is to grasp that, by King Yama basically saying like, anything else, I will give you all the material you want as long as you don't ask that question. So Nachiketa in this Upanishad, being so virtuous, being so devout and dogged, continues to ask King Yama, basically, no, really, I want to know. I will go without anything to know. This life is but a flicker compared to the eternity of death. And that you see that everywhere. You see that in Christian religion. We are being alive is like the wick, and comparatively, the rest of the candle is eternity that we have to live, and this is just a preparation for the eternity after death. So that's pretty ubiquitous with all cultures, is grasping death and what happens after that. King Yama goes on to say, in so many words, the way to escape death, to achieve immortality, and it says pretty explicitly immortality. Maybe it's a translation thing. It says immortality in the book. the way to do that is to find Atman, or the true self, to relinquish ego and relinquish desire. Desire, excuse me. And I'm going to just read a few passages that I found really cool. So here's the first one. The senses derive from objects of sense perception, sense objects from mind, mind from intellect, and intellect from ego, ego from undifferentiated consciousness, and consciousness from Brahman. Brahman is the first cause and last refuge. Brahman, the hidden self in everyone, does not shine forth. He is revealed only to those who keep their minds one-pointed on the Lord of Love and thus develop a superconscious manner of knowing. Meditation enables them to go deeper and deeper into consciousness, from the world of words to the world of thoughts, then beyond thoughts to wisdom in the self. And it's very instructional. It's pretty clear. Meditate. Be single-minded, and get a clear consciousness, a super consciousness. And I think that's so cool. Even in translation, you can pretty much know, like, this isn't some esoteric, like, mystic, like, ooh, maybe if the stars align. No, it's very clear cut. Just meditate, be one-minded. Yama goes on to say this, and I like this passage because it talks about the reincarnation cycle that we hear about in Hindi culture. Being, you haven't lived a proper life, or you haven't achieved moksha, which is enlightenment, basically. You haven't achieved this, therefore you're going to keep going through the cycle of death and rebirth. So this is a little excerpt that outlines that. Only the one-pointed mind attains the state of unity. There is no one but the self. Who sees multiplicity, but not the one indivisible self, must wander on and on from death to death. And in this excerpt, I really like it because it starts to talk about reincarnation and the reincarnation cycle, where we get a lot of secondhand hearsay about, like, oh, they believe in this reincarnation thing. I don't know where they get it from. I think it's like a cultural thing. Here it talks about that. Written down in the Upanishad. Here it is. Only one-pointed mind attains this state of unity. There is no one but the self. Who sees multiplicity, but not the one indivisible self, must wander on and on from death to death. I think it's pretty interesting that it's actually written down. It's not something that you have to just take on faith that people believe that. People are instructed this way. And one more thing that outlines the reincarnation cycle, little passage here. If one fails to realize Brahman in this life before the physical sheath is shed, he must again put on a body in the world of embodied creatures. Basically saying, like, if you don't realize enlightenment, if you don't achieve moksha, you're going to live another life. And that's a negative thing. We have this idea that, like, oh, I want to live forever, and I want to experience many different lives. I want to see that and this, and this is basically saying, like, no, like, realize Brahman, and you won't have to go through that. You will just live forever in one single consciousness. Pretty cool. It's not necessarily something I believe, but who's to say that that's incorrect? Billions of people believe this. And then King Yama is talking to Nachiketa again, basically saying in a little bit more detail about the reincarnation cycle. He says, "Now, O Nachiketa, I will tell you of this unseen eternal Brahman and what befalls the self after death. Of those unaware of the self, some are born as embodied creatures, while others remain in a lower stage of evolution, as determined by their own need for growth." So it's sort of, like, you don't pass high school, you're going to get held back. So you want to graduate, right? That's what Yama is saying here to Nachiketa. And then I picked out this one passage here because some of the things I like about the Upanishads, just Vedic texts from India in general, I really like the language that they use, and some of the things that they bring up are so strange, and it seems like arbitrary, but they say it, and it's so weird. Okay, so here it says, there's a city with 11 gates, of which the ruler is the unborn self, whose light forever shines. They go beyond sorrow, who meditate on the self and are freed from the cycle of birth and death, for this self is supreme. Okay, so all of that, great, it's got content. There's a city with 11 gates. Who picked 11? And like, what significance does this have to the whole process of enlightenment and liberation and things? I just think it's so funny, and you see that so often in, Indian text, even, Chinese and East Asia, you see these like arbitrary things, and you're like, who picked that? What significance does that number, does that location, does that fact have to do with any of this? It doesn't serve the metaphor at all. Is it that they really, does that have a connection somewhere else in the story here, or is it just they just take it on faith? There's just 11. There's a place with 11 gates, So I think it's so funny and so cool, and I like to bring that out because it makes you think, and it makes you it adds to the mystery of the lore of it all. What is this 11 gates? What's the significance of it? Do we ever see it again? Why was it brought up in the first place? I love the mystery of it. And again, getting into the imagery of the Upanishad, I really like this just for the imagery of it. Here we go. The cosmos comes forth from Brahman and moves in him. With his power, it reverberates like thunder crashing in the sky. Those who realize him pass beyond the sway of death. I just think it's so cool that they're using nature and power, the raw power of nature to demonstrate the power of like this internal process. It's all inward, but the power is like lightning crashing, thunder crashing. I think it's great. For the rest of the Upanishad, this one specifically, but I think it's pretty prevalent in all of them, is getting past the senses, not being swayed by the fact that we live through these observable senses, our 5 senses, and it can be so easy to think that that's what the world is, that that's what consciousness is. But if you turn off your senses and you turn off all of this chasing for desire, for material and desire and all that, you turn inward, and then that's when like the real game begins. That's like the end game. You can survive so long, you can achieve so much, but like it all only means something once you turn inward. So that is one Upanishad of many. It is the Katha. I think it's pronounced Katha. It's the Death Upanishad. It is Nachiketa discussing with King Yama, what happens after death. I hope you found it interesting. I think all of this stuff is so fascinating. A good friend of mine brought the Upanishads to my attention a long time ago. I haven't really gotten around to reading it in depth. I've dabbled a little bit in the past, but hopefully I can read through this and bring more episodes of the Upanishads to you. If you enjoy this video, let me know. If you want me to check anything else out, if you have any suggestions, let me know. So, guys, thanks so much for watching. I will see you next time.